few experiences in which the gap is bigger between how awesome I thought something would be when I was a kid and how awful it turned out to be as an adult, as with buying a car. Oh, don't get me wrong, I'm sure if you've got a blank check and no limits, it can still be fun, maybe, but for most of us, car shopping is all about balancing desire, budget, and availability. Today, with the chip crunch, supply chain shortage, and the fast expanding popularity of electric vehicles, it can be harder than ever to get a car that meets your needs without needlessly breaking the bank. In this video, I'm going to lay out some of the common ways people get raked over the coals buying an EV and give you some strategies for avoiding the worst pitfalls. And it's worth noting that unlike most of our videos, this is a pretty US or at least North American centric video. So first and foremost, the best way to not get screwed buying an EV right now is to not buy an electric vehicle right now. Don't get me wrong, if you're in the market for a new or new to you car and you need to buy one right now, I still think you should go for an electric one over one with an internal combustion engine. But now is a bad time to buy for a variety of reasons. Competition is heating up, but demand is vastly outstripping supply, which puts the buyer of a new EV at a disadvantage. Prices on the used EV market are inflated to the point of absurdity as a consequence, and new vehicle costs are way up, with delivery timelines often stretching far into the future, especially for less feature-rich models. Even Tesla, which is producing and delivering electric vehicles at a rate no other automaker in the US market can come remotely close to, has a wait of nearly 6 months for its popular Model Y, or 3 to 6 months for a Model 3 depending on variant. A Model S means waiting 6 months as well, and a Model X will take 13. As of writing this script, the only Tesla you can buy and take possession of immediately is the seriously pricey Model S Plaid, which has essentially no wait time. But I'm not picking on Tesla here. Wait times on many, if not most, new EVs are stretching into months, though for companies who use dealerships, it is also getting possible to sometimes find cars for sale in a dealer lot, which brings us to the next challenge. It's important to understand that the buying experience can be very different depending if you're buying from a company that sells directly to consumers or uses a dealership model. Tesla, Rivian, and Lucid, for example, sell their vehicles directly to consumers, though they may use delivery centers for the actual process of handing over the keys, or keycards. Ford, Volkswagen, Hyundai, and other legacy brands, on the other hand, sell their cars through a dealership network. Even if you pre-order a car online from one of those manufacturers, in the US, you're still just reserving a space in line to buy a car from a dealership. And that brings us to one of the most obnoxious parts of buying an EV, or in fact, any high-demand car from a dealership right now, the dreaded market adjustment, or ADM, which stands for additional dealer markup. This is an additional charge added to the cost of a vehicle purchase based on what the dealership thinks the local market will bear, and these days it can be a ton of money. Depending on the vehicle, it's not uncommon to see market adjustments ranging from $5,000 to $30,000, with outliers on both sides of that scale. There are a variety of ways as a buyer to deal with a market adjustment. The first is to just pay it. If you really want the car right now, and money and resale value aren't big obstacles for you, go ahead and pay it. Just do so with the knowledge that you're overpaying, sometimes by a considerable margin. That said, the market adjustment is a place where most dealerships are going to be open to negotiating. If a dealer is asking $15,000 over sticker and you talk them down to $5,000 over sticker, they're still coming away with $5,000 extra for nothing. And a buyer in the shop is always worth far more than the theoretical buyer who might come in tomorrow and pay more, regardless of what the sales manager might tell you in the moment. Here's the key to remember about negotiating when buying a car though. You have to be willing to walk away. That's not just about pretending either. You have to actually be okay with saying, this isn't the deal I want, walking out the door and not getting that vehicle. If you're not willing to do that, or you are, but only as a negotiating tactic, you're going to end up paying whatever the dealership wants you to. Which brings us to the next way to deal with the market adjustment: research. Some dealerships are asking huge prices over sticker, while others are selling at MSRP or close to it. In the age of the internet, there's great crowdsourced data available that shows which dealerships are adding market adjustments or aren't, and we'll link to some of those in the video description. Go to a dealership offering MSRP without added cost, or go to one with a market adjustment and show them that you can get the car for cheaper elsewhere and give them a chance to match the price. Making this work can mean traveling, by the way. You're going to be getting better prices and have a better position from which to negotiate in an area where there are multiple dealerships selling the same model in close proximity than you are in an area where you're looking at the only Volkswagen Ioniq Mach 2 for 80 miles in either direction. The other option, of course, is to eat the wait time and buy from a manufacturer that sells directly. But Tesla raised the price of the Model Y 8 times in 2021, so costs are still reflecting demand, just in a different way. The market adjustment isn't the only way you can end up paying more than you want to for a vehicle, though. One of the first things we do when we set out to buy a car is look what we really need, things like range, passenger capacity, and maybe certain ADAS systems. Then we look at the things that we want or don't want, such as ventilated seats, panoramic roofs, and specific color options. We then figure out what it costs to get the things we need, often not the things we don't. But it doesn't always work that way right now with many EV models. Manufacturers often send their higher trim variants to market well ahead of the more entry-level ones. Once a vehicle's been on the market for a while, that does start to change, of course. But that means that when you're looking at things like automakers' release timelines and starting prices for new models, you need to take everything with a pinch of salt. If automaker X says that its new EV will be out in June and will have a starting price of $30,000, that doesn't mean that in June you'll be able to buy a $30,000 car. More than likely, come June, you'll be able to buy the Pro Premium Limited XL trim for $60 grand, and you could be waiting months or longer before the $30,000 base model comes to market. So far, I've talked about price concerns, but that's not the only way you can get in trouble with your next EV purchase. So let's talk for a bit about understanding specifications, because this is something that seems to bite a lot of buyers, especially first-time EV buyers, in the butt. It's important to understand not only what you need in a vehicle, but also some of the realities of what you're getting with any given vehicle. There are a host of ways we see people get tripped up here, so I want to give you some guidance to help keep you on your feet. First off, let's talk about range, since it's the thing that's at the forefront of many people's minds when they look at an EV. When you see range figures presented by a company or a reviewer, take pains to note what standard those figures are presented in so you don't end up comparing across different standards. It's also a good idea to try to look at the standards used in your region. Using the European WLTP figures may not be a good representation of what you'll get on American roads, for instance. It's also common for automakers to provide range figures based on the most efficient driving mode a car has, which may not be a mode most drivers use a lot of the time, since high efficiency modes may include reduced or even deactivated climate control or lowered available torque, for instance. In a similar vein, due to both battery efficiency loss and climate control, cold weather is going to come with a range hit too, anywhere from 15 to 30% of total range, depending on how the vehicle is equipped and how cold it is outside. So if you've got a 40-mile commute each way to work and live where the temperature gets well below freezing in the wintertime, you're going to want to give that 115-mile range EV a pass. When looking at a used EV, it's critical to understand that while model names may stay the same, specs can change from year to year. On my cross-country road trip, for instance, I encountered someone who'd recently bought a used Tesla Model S and couldn't understand why they weren't getting 200-plus kilowatt supercharging speeds. But their model was only rated for a little over 100 kilowatts when new, something that wasn't explained to them when they bought the car. Likewise, the Chevy Bolt was rather absurdly available with DC fast charging as an optional extra at all trim levels. And if it's important to you, you have to take pains to be absolutely sure the car you're buying has it. I know this sounds like a colossal pain and a barrier for people looking to make the switch to electric cars. But while what you need to pay attention to may be different, the actual process is very similar to buying a petrol car. I'm reminded of a family friend who bought a petrol car in part looking forward to getting good fuel economy, only to find out that they didn't at all. Turns out when they decided they wanted the more feature-rich model, that meant they also got a V6 instead of the more fuel-efficient inline-4, something they either didn't realize or didn't understand the consequences of. Likewise, when my grandfather bought a diesel Mercedes in the early 1980s, he had to not only adapt to a new fueling infrastructure, he also had to understand things like waiting for glow plugs to heat up and driving with a very different torque curve than he was used to. My point here is that this is going to get easier. The things we need to learn in order to drive on electrons instead of fossil fuels may be different, but they aren't any more complicated. If you were to step back and try to explain everything that goes into successfully buying and driving an internal combustion vehicle to someone who didn't grow up with the concept, you'd quickly realize just how many complications there are, from choosing the right viscosity oil to the vast array of maintenance intervals for wear components, many of which aren't found in EV for what it's worth, to force versus natural induction, to knowing if you need petrol or diesel, and at what octane rating in the case of petrol. I'm optimistic that the buying process is going to get simpler too, though it's not there yet. Tesla didn't just disrupt the automotive landscape with its electric vehicles, it's changing our ideas of what the buying experience can be like. And while it's got its flaws, hopefully the good elements of the direct sales model will gain traction even among legacy automakers. Meanwhile, we're already seeing cars that had considerable market adjustments when first released, dropping back to MSRP pretty much across the board. And lest anyone forget, when the Chrysler PT Cruiser debuted for the 2001 model year, dealerships asked and received absolutely ridiculous markups during the first few months, but that's certainly not a car we associate with most buyers having to pay way over sticker. EVs are going mainstream, but they aren't quite there yet, and that, combined with supply challenges, means that it's a tough moment for the EV buyer. But electric vehicles aren't going anywhere. If you can wait, I still suggest you wait. But if you need to buy a car in the next 6 months, think about some of these strategies to help avoid paying more than you want to or getting something that just doesn't suit your needs adequately. As electric vehicle buyers, we're at the vanguard of a new wave of mass market consumer technology, and that's not always a comfortable place to be. It's certainly not always a cheap place to be. But I truly think that we're over the initial hump, and it's only going to get easier from here. That's it for today. If you liked the video, be sure to give it a thumbs up, and don't forget to leave your thoughts below or in our free to join Discord chat room. There's a link in the video description. If you haven't already, make sure you subscribe to this channel and our other channel, Transfer Evolved Take 2, for longer takes. And don't forget to give the bell a little ring on both our channels so you don't miss our next video. Thanks on behalf of the entire T crew go out to the folk on my right for being our $15 to $49 a month patrons. Special thanks to our $50 a month patrons, Chris Maxwell, Brian Newton, Jason Boder, Dave Kitchen, Michael Goad, Ricky Long, Andrew Martin, Guido Drahada, Brophy Wolf, Tez on the Gong, Gordon C., Stephen O'Donohue, Kyle Hodson, Anthony Coates, Regine Fellows, Rory Litwin, Anonymous Freak, Jim Burness, and Denny Hyde. And our deepest gratitude to our $100 a month Patreon supporters, Marcel Ward, Reggie Watts, Joe Bresney, JP Figureback, Will Grayland, Matthew Drobnak, John Lyons, Christopher Lee Jones, Laura Reynolds, Paul Conway, Ellery Hensley, and Ian. Feeling left out? You can join our Patreon at the link below or show us your support through Bitcoin, Ko-fi, or our cool swag store. Thanks for joining me, and as always, keep evolving! Haven't already, make sure you subscribe to this channel and our other channel, Transfer Evolved Take 2, which I could keep telling you about if the teleprompter hadn't frozen up, but since it did freeze up, I can't, which means I have to get up and back the teleprompter up so I can continue, which means I have to actually start this whole process over.